a Nobody's Project production. Before we get into the cold open, we need to give you a language warning. We can't tell you which words they are, but if you want to opt out of today's episode, then we'll see you next Tuesday. Let's play a little word game. We'll give you a short phrase and let's see what alternative phrase you can come up with without swearing, okay? Phrase 1. That fucking cunt just shat on us again, the prick. Take your time. This game can be a little more challenging than it first appears. If you come up with a statement similar to, that very poorly behaved person just took advantage of us again for their own benefit, then give yourself a point. Now, try saying the same statement again, but this time using the same or less number of syllables as the first phrase, which is around 11 syllables. This task is a little bit more difficult than the first, isn't it? There's a reason behind that. Let's play this game again. Phrase 2. What a cunt's act. Now the stupid arsehole's behaving like a bitch and pretending he didn't do fucking shit. Take some extra time. This phrase is a little more difficult. If you came up with a statement similar to, what they did is horrendous, now that horrible person is walking around pretending they didn't have anything to do with what they actually did, then give yourself another point. And add a bonus point if you actually had a pen and paper handy to play along with the game. Now let's turn it up to 11 and try to say the same statement again, and only use the same or less number of syllables as the second phrase, which is around 28 syllables. If you don't finish in time, you can take this question home and complete it for homework. But we don't recommend discussing this around the dinner table. We're pretty sure you can figure out why. So what is the point of this little word game? Apart from wanting an excuse to rip out some classic Aussie swearing, it does illustrate a point. Words like fuck, shit, cunt, and arsehole are some of the most versatile words in the modern English language, and have been for a very long time. Although it wasn't until the 1960s that the word fuck started appearing in text, and it wasn't cited by the Oxford English Dictionary until the 1970s. But, believe it or not, the first known use of the word fuck was in a 1528 manuscript where this parenthetical was scrawled into the margins of a De Officiis manuscript by an anonymous monk. It said, quote, "Oh, der fucking abbot," end quote. Which contextually is correct, as it is an intensifier and most likely a placeholder for a better word the anonymous monk wasn't able to find. It's these better words we don't have in our current language. It's a strong argument as to why swearing has become so prevalent these days. We had this very challenge putting the social project together. What do you call a person who displays psychopathic or sociopathic behaviours to only one or a few people they associate with? What do you call someone who's not a complete psychopath but shows some significant pathological traits? Like a lot of people, instead of being lost for words, we landed on something crude, rude and offensive, but kind of relevant. Hopefully we will eventually find better words. To find a way forward to a greater humanity, we need to be inclusive, and so we hope to shift away from relying on swear words. We are all in need of better words, so we can have these better conversations. But for now, swearing is just going to have to fucking do. Too Many Arseholes is a social project looking at the rise of pathological behaviours in our society and the erosion of social trust, creating a better conversation around why this is and finding a way forward to a greater humanity. This podcast is also part of a larger social project that we want you, the listener, to join in on. Key to this project is bringing together threads from many academic disciplines to create a body of knowledge we can develop with you to help us all with having better conversations around these pathological behaviours in our personal and social circles. Thanks for joining us today for Season 1, Episode 7. Today's episode is an English lesson, but not one that you've ever had at school. We are going to go on a word hunt and look how word definitions have been changed and weaponised. We unpack our current word usage and open the floor for improvements. We review some recent political rhetoric and then explore how we can move this better conversation forward. Lastly, this episode is a language episode, so feel free to have a laugh as we attempt these pronunciations. And so thanks for joining us and for coming along on this journey of reflection and discovery as we attempt to unpack and better understand why there's just too many arseholes. Let's start today off by going on a word hunt. Yes, I said hunt. This type of adventure won't be one of excitement and challenges. It will be more similar to stepping through the unknown and into darkness and trying to find words that are always on the tip of your tongue, but also never really there. When researching the origins of words for emotions, it can become quite complex very quickly, as their meanings and usage have evolved significantly over time. Many words for feelings predate written history in some form, but their first appearance in English text is much later. The modern catch-all term emotion itself did not exist until 1830s. Earlier societies used words like passion and affection. And as is the fluidity of language, both these words have quite different meanings these days. Words derived from the Old English period, 5th to 11th century, are the earliest forms of the English language. Old English includes original Celtic tongue, a little bit of Latin, Anglo-Saxon and Nordic words from these migrating influences over the previous millennia. But many words may have changed in meaning. Some of the more commonly used words from this period used today include love, from the Old English word of lufu, meaning love, care, desire. Sorrow, from the Old English word of sorg, meaning grief, regret, anxiety. Feeling, from the Old English word of filan, meaning to touch or perceive through the senses. Over time, this meaning expanded to include internal emotional experiences. And hope, from the Old English word of hopper, meaning hope or expectation. And there are old words that are no longer used these days. Wonderlich, an Old English word for the feeling of wonder mixed with fear, or the awe experienced when seeing something both marvellous and unsettling. And finally, heartbello, an Old English word meaning sorrow, grief, or profound emotional pain that weighs upon the heart. This does sound similar to heartbreak. With the Norman conquest came many French and more Latin words into the English language, expanding the vocabulary for better describing feelings. New words included anger. This word entered English around the 13th century from Old Norse. The word anger, meaning grief, sorrow, or trouble. Another word was bliss, a sense of great happiness from the Old English word bliss, but its usage shifted during the Middle Ages. Patience, from Old French patience, which was derived from Latin. This word first appeared in English in the 13th century. More words for emotions entered the English language during the Renaissance, the 16th and 17th century. This period saw an explosion of new language, including terms for internal states, many drawn from classic sources. Jubilant, meaning feeling or expressing great happiness. This word entered English in the late 16th century. Melancholy, from Middle English via Old French, from Latin melancholia. It was used to describe a state of pensive sadness or gloominess, and was prominent in Renaissance medical theory. And there are also words for emotions from the 18th century onwards. Sentiment, popularised in the 18th century, it describes a refined or delicate feeling or opinion, particularly in the context of morality and aesthetics. Emotion, the modern concept, was introduced in the 1830s by Scottish philosopher Thomas Browne. It came into wide use as a scientific term in the late 19th century. Nostalgia, coined in the 17th century by a Swiss physician to describe a form of homesickness, the word came to mean a sentimental longing for the past. Solastalgia, coined in the early 21st century to describe the distress caused by environmental change, quite a recent word invented to articulate a modern emotion. And the word of the year for 2025 is parasocial, which is an indirect association the listener has with the presenter. But where are the modern words that separate out the different intensifiers of pathological behaviours? Where are the words that help define a person who is a victim or a recipient of a pathological person's attention and manipulation, apart from the word sucker? What words can we use to separate out a person's different associations and how their behaviour changes across these groups? We can't use clinical terms like bipolar because we can't diagnose people. But the closest we found was inauthentic, and that doesn't really hit the mark. What do you call a person who is not clinically suffering from antisocial personality disorder? Geez, that's such a shit term. But is still treating at least one person or group pathologically? We don't have the words for these conversations. These words may have never existed. It may be a sign of our social maturity if we can start to include these words in our language going forward. But for now, as abrasive as it is, we're just going to have to keep using the word arseholes. There is no intention for this project to point fingers at one person, group or organisation with regards to the vanishing of words in our language that would enable these better conversations. It's all probably wrapped up in how cultures generally morph over time and how our societies have happily morphed through capitalism to hyper-capitalism over the last 100 or so years, and our language has morphed with it. We used to take oaths, now we sign contracts. We used to be workers, people that worked. Then that shifted to employees, people that could be made use of. More recently, people were called resources, not people, resources. The human part of that title doesn't negate the commodification that has been made to people that need to work. But they didn't stop there. Most recently, they called us humans capital, rounding out the full transition from working people through to objects with value and not much else. And we all have accepted this over the last 3 to 4 decades. We used to trust people, and now we're told to assume. And we all know that to assume is to make an ass of you and me. How does this phrase reflect on the toxic language we now normalise within our daily lives? We've even dragged in religion as an alternative to trust. How often have you been told to have a little faith? Why can't we instead have a little trust? Or even better, a lot of trust, because we live in a trustworthy community. For example, the word assumption is currently used to temper a person's understanding of what they should have expected in a given situation. Think of an example where you were told, "Oh, you assumed that would happen." Now change the word assumed to the word trusted. In your example, did you actually assume or trust that the other party would play by the social rulebook? Could a better response be, "I didn't assume. I trusted that would happen because I want to live in a trustworthy society." At its worst is when the language is weaponised through propaganda and other antisocial activities. Joseph Goebbels and the Nazis. Wow, we got to episode 7 before we mentioned these fucking assholes. Wrote the book on dehumanising language. How to manipulate a population through the othering of minorities by associating them with vermin, insects and disease. And unfortunately this language has returned and is now more prevalent today than it was 10, 20 or even 30 years ago in some political circles. Have we lost the ability to see and understand dehumanising language when it's used? Can we better identify when organisations use capitalistic and commodificationistic, yes, that's not a real word, but we do need to be creative here, capitalistic and commodificationistic terms to refer to human beings, real people with lives, families and feelings. But if a person has a pathological association towards you, then they can't be feeling, nor can they empathise with your feelings. These pathological executives, directors and managers who call you resources or capital and not people can't consider the whole you. They just don't have the hardware to run the software. No, they can't think in this higher socially minded way. But can they run a business that needs real people to produce the goods or services? Of course they can. Can they bring all these people along on the journey and make sure each experience is stable, critical and safe? Probably not. only if it suits their bottom line, and if it doesn't, hello AI. So here we are again, yet again, where money, capital, has become more important than humanity. In an article by Andrew Jakubowicz, ABC Australia, from March 2025, where he dives into the phrase social cohesion has been used in politics to win campaigns and also weaponised against the ability to protest. Quote, social cohesion remains a confusing and somewhat amorphous idea in Australia's public debates. It has become de rigueur in any discussion of actual or threatening community violence, as well as a marker of threats to good social order and social well-being. Some believe social cohesion has become weaponised against the rights to protest and hold unpopular opinions. For others, it represents the moral core and political goal of democratic societies. In the everyday lives of people, it might simply stand for the importance for everyone getting on together. For others, it distracts from addressing the more fundamental and resistant issues of inequity, such as social class differences and racism. Gough Whitlam used social cohesion in his 1972 It's Time campaign speech to describe the underpinning of his community and nation-building strategies. John Howard used the term as code for the threats he saw posed by radicalisation of Muslim youth. During the governments of Kevin Rudd and Julia Gillard, social cohesion was placed for the time with social inclusion, a term they borrowed from Tony Blair, which offered a different take on the social challenges of order and fairness. Then under Prime Minister Tony Abbott, Malcolm Turnbull, Scott Morrison and Anthony Albanese, the emphasis on cohesion returned with a vengeance, such that it now stands at the intersection of domestic and geopolitical tensions." End quote. Why did the language change for social cohesion to social inclusion? According to the Social Cohesion Hub, social inclusion is one of the three equal parts of the social cohesion triangle, along with social mobility and social capital. The Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, states, quote, "A cohesive society works towards the well-being of all its members, fights exclusion and marginalisation, creates a sense of belonging, promotes trust and offers its members the opportunity for upward social mobility." The OECD concept measures social cohesion through three different but equally important dimensions: social inclusion, social capital, and social mobility. Social mobility is the degree to which individuals are able to, or believe they can, improve their position in society. Social inclusion looks at the extent of exclusion and marginalisation, such as poverty, inequality, and social polarisation. Social capital refers to the networks of relationships between individuals and groups, degree of interpersonal and social trust, and the level of civic participation. For a holistic understanding of these dimensions, it is important to combine objective aspects such as income equality and poverty lines with subjective perception-based aspects such as life satisfaction and sense of belonging." End quote. We can't put too much weight on the OECD statement, as there's no reference to who put this together. But for the sake of having a better conversation, let's lean into this statement a little. According to the OECD, social trust is part of the social capital component of social cohesion. But really, you have to trust that social inclusion is equally prominent within your society, as you also have to trust all the social mobility options available to you within your society. Interestingly, in this statement regarding social mobility, they use the phrase able to or believe they can instead of the word trust. Does it blow your mind that an organisation that puts its entire focus on economic cooperation and trade development can't use the word trust appropriately? Trust is the glue that binds our societies together. We can make contracts, laws and agreements, but we have to trust these contracts, laws and agreements will be kept, enforced, and those breaking them penalised. No matter what social structure we come up with, trust will be underpinning them all. We are only who we are today because we trusted each other throughout our history enough to get us this far in our social journey. Until we get academic input from anthropologists and historians with regards to our social maturity and social history, it anecdotally appears that there is limited knowledge around pathological behaviours as opposed to pathological people. Throughout the past up to this very day, pathological behaviours are viewed to be just another aspect of being human, not so much a disorder or a shortcoming. Nor has this shortcoming been aligned to gross success in capitalism. How can capitalism not reward pathological behaviours? How can we bring humanity back into capitalism? How can being human be more important than money? Are we more aware than ever before of our human state, and are there opportunities to improve our language so these conversations are easier to have? It has only been in the last few decades that we have started to see how our individual neural structures influence all aspects of our personality and decision-making. If there is research prior to the 21st century detailing how our neurological hardware underpins our thinking software, then please get in touch with the project and bring this to our attention. Where we think this project is going is to re-explore our greatest thinkers and the philosophers of our past, to see how their work aligns or misaligns with the latest findings in neuroscience and biological psychopathological studies. As we dive deeper into our language, we can start to ask questions around: does the absence of good words for humane conversations reflect the societies of our time? Has our gradual shift from capitalism to hyper-capitalism changed our language, or has our language aided the shift by not empowering those in decision-making positions with the knowledge and accompanying words to identify these shifts and effectively moderate and maintain our humane societies? Can we embrace all these technologies and ensure humanity is always more important than money? So far today, we've explored some words from our past and how our language has been commodified. We've taken a quick dip into weaponisation of words through propaganda, and also looked at how our politicians tweak words to suit their rhetoric and agendas. But where does that actually leave us? Where will we find the words we need to make these better conversations easier to have, clear in its messaging, and not abrasive to anyone taking part? Well, that's where you come in. Words are not things that someone just invents and then makes everyone adopt. Words in our language are semi-fluid in nature and something that develops through critical mass and popularity. So we decided that there will be some limits to this social project when it comes eventually down to solutions. The best paths forward are not the ones that any one group can know and predict. To create new words, we will need to hear from you. You may have words you've borrowed from another language. It may have been a slang word which is now not so abrasive. You may have a phrase or even a tone or a way of saying current words. There is no limit to how we solve for these better words to have these better conversations. It is a blank space we identified at the start of the project that we want to attempt to fill. Because in the absence of good words to use, we end up using gap fillers, curse words, intensifiers, and other slang that can't convey actual meaning, and instead the conversation grinds to a halt and we can't progress any further. But we want the conversation to progress further. That's the whole premise of the Too Many Arseholes social project. And so as easy as it would be just to continue to fill the gaps with swear words and leaning into the vulgarities of our language to tiptoe our way forward, let's reflect on words we have used so far to get to this point in episode 7 of season 1. We have framed up the language used in this podcast so far intentionally away from using the term antisocial personality disorder. Once because it's a clinical term and we're not clinicians, nor do we want to be seen as ones. We have also veered away from ASPD because it's a very unsexy word and potentially a conversational killer. And as such, we have, with a little bit of liberty, rekindled the words psychopath and sociopath because they are still commonly used and misused words. We've also broken down their definitions in terms of this social project. Go back to listen to episode 2, Who Are These Arseholes?, if you need a little refresher. We have also leaned into the phrase pathological insert behaviour here. We have taken this approach because it is a commonly used phrase. There's a pathological liar. If you extrapolate that out to many other behaviours, then it somewhat makes sense. He's a pathological manager could mean that man has no consideration for his department and behaves and makes decisions with no respect for them or their needs. She's a pathological teammate could mean she plays on the team only for her own benefit and can't work within the team. And by the way, yes, a pathological teammate is an oxymoron. They're pathological in how they present the information could mean they have no care or consideration for how correct or complete the information is, even though the audience expects the information to be true and correct. But the word pathological is not the right word, and we have used it because the only other words we felt sort of worked here were untrustworthy, heartless, selfish, and alike. He's an untrustworthy manager. She's a selfish teammate. They're heartless in how they present the information. So here we are needing new words. We need nouns to identify people who behave pathologically towards us. We need adjectives to describe behaviours and actions that are pathological in nature. And we need to reinterpret words that are pathological actions. We need to find words that are more inclusive than our current referred nouns. He's just an arsehole. We have to find inclusive adjectives better than, that's a cunt sack. And we need to identify actions more clearly than, she's fucking him over again. And we're better to look for these new words than in the people who are going to need to adopt them most and use them to get us all out of this mess. Our youngest generations. Our youngest generations have always been a melting pot for new words. We pig-Latined our way through school and thought we were smart. Our fashion trends came with new words and phrases every few years. You can throw shade on someone or object to adulting for the afternoon. You can get doxed, ghosted, gaslit, trolled, catfished and many other acts that mostly didn't exist prior to the 21st century. And when you pick up that ball, you can yeet it as far as you want. And so how do we lean into getting our most vocal creative generation to join in the conversation? What can we do to ask them to lead us forward in creating these better conversations? Well, this is where the power of intergenerational cooperation and collaboration comes to the fore. When we listen to our wisest, our elderly, we can better understand our humanity and social responsibilities, and more importantly, what can happen when they are lost, broken, or dismantled. When we engage with our Gen X's and Gen Y's, we can get the enablers and engineers of our current strongest generations. We can foster a pathway forward through compiling this new knowledge and ensuring it is distributed so that it's at everyone's fingertips for when it is needed. And finally, we need to set the stage for our youngest generations, the millennials, who have the most at stake. We can ensure our youngest generations understand the generational trauma cycle and how that can be stopped. We can educate them on the new neuroscience findings showing us how genetically poor genes or malformed neurons and head traumas can all greatly contribute to a person's social and emotional behaviour, or more importantly, the lack of it. If we can do all this, if we can confirm the latest science to be true, if we can better understand our social maturation journey, and if we can know how to break the generational trauma cycles, then, with confidence, we should be able to step back and watch our youngest generations make us all proud by owning this challenge and creating new vocabulary to identify pathological behaviours and pathological people, understand why they are this way, and clearly leading us all forward to ensure we shift back to a mentally healthy, socially stable and secure societies, to a future with a greater humanity. Thanks again for taking the time to listen in. In today's English lesson, we went on a word hunt in an attempt to find better words than the usual swearing intensifiers that we resort to so easily. We also addressed how words can be weaponised against us and how we can better arm ourselves through knowledge to not be influenced by these pathological people's rhetoric. And we also laid down a loose map on how we can use our intergenerational powers to collaborate and cooperate together to create a path forward back to a more humane society. Too Many Arseholes is researched, written and produced by Nobody's Project. To put this series together, we have drawn on many sources, publications, books and podcasts. Throughout this series, we will ask you to go and read or listen to an article, book or podcast to accompany our episodes. Check out our show notes for recommendations for upcoming episodes and also for our sources. It is important that we acknowledge and promote the people and the work they have published that has inspired this project. And finally, we are always keen to hear from you. Do you have an experience, idea or insight that you'd love to share with the project? If so, please send an email to contactus@toomanyarsholes.com. Visit our social media pages and please feel free to get in contact and have a better conversation with us. To support the project, you can go to our Patreon page where you can get more information on the project and support us. You can also join our Patreon group and get early and ad-free episodes as well as other benefits. You can also like, subscribe and review the podcast to help spread the conversation, and the best way to support us is to share the podcast with your family and friends and colleagues so you can have a better conversation with them. Until we catch up again, give a shit about our planet and just please, don't be an arsehole.